Well, welcome to our webinar on making the best use of virtual assistants. Um, about 3 or 4 years ago, I actually read the 4 Hour Work Week by Tim Ferriss, which is quite a useful book to read. And in it, he talked about using virtual assistants as a way of improving your productivity and freeing up time. About the same time, I had a colleague, Andrew Leinig, in Adelaide, who had employed a virtual assistant and was just raving about how good they were. So I started investigating it further. I'd been selectively using secretarial services and stuff for some jobs around my business, but it was probably an unsatisfying experience for me for a variety of reasons. Um, my business is also I've structured it so that I actually don't want a lot of employees, and I'm not interested in having a full-time employee. And we might talk about some of that in a while. So a virtual assistant appealed to me. So I tracked down Ray, and Ray's logged on with us today. So Ray's my virtual assistant. Started with Ray on a part-time basis. She was worked out so well for me that we've now been together for about 3 years. We're on a full-time basis, and it's a great relationship that I think suits both of us. About 12 months ago, I actually engaged another assistant, Chris, and Chris also works full time for me. I'm going to talk a little bit about what they do for me in a second. As a result of I guess engaging virtual assistants, I get a number of questions from people all the time about, well, what do they do and how does it all work and how do you find them and all that sort of stuff. So I thought this webinar would be a good way of just getting into those sorts of things. So that's where we're heading today. So let's start talking about some of the key questions. All right. So what's a virtual assistant? The dictionary description is that a virtual assistant provides a range of online administrative, secretarial, and clerical support, as well as creative and/or technical services for clients. So, my experience is you can have a virtual assistant to do just about anything for you. These people are usually home-based, and they can be located anywhere in the world with an internet connection. So, be involved, Australia, wherever you like. I've actually worked with virtual employees in Bangladesh, India, New Zealand, the Philippines, and Poland. And both my current VAs are located in the Philippines, and lots of good reasons for that. I guess they often have no physical contact with virtual assistants, so it really is an electronic relationship, and it works fairly well for lots of people. And you can employ them on a range of basis, on a project basis, on a casual basis, on a part-time basis, or a full-time basis. So now, I've employed both Ray and Chris on a full-time basis, and that works for us, but I've also used other people with other skill sets on a project basis or different ways. They do a range of different things. So Ray does a lot of stuff for me on research. She writes all my blog articles and for a number of websites and does that for us. She's actually helped me co-author a book and done all the research and a lot of the writing in that book, which has been fantastic. She does secretarial duties, typing up notes from clients and workshops and that sort of stuff, manages my CRM, and just does a whole heap of sort of smaller tasks. Chris, on the other hand, Chris is my webmaster, and Chris is probably logged on today as well, but he's got the flu at the moment, so he may not have. Chris manages sort of 5 odd websites for me, does SEO type work for them. He does some client work. We're starting to develop websites for clients at the moment. And he also pulls together our flyers and newsletters and all that sort of stuff that you would have seen as, say, part of the promotion for these webinars. They're both based in the Philippines, and happy to say they both survived the recent typhoon over there unharmed, which was really good, and their families are safe as well. So that's particularly pleasing. Just going to take you through some frequently asked questions that I get asked, and I sort of sat down and went back through the questions that I've been asked over time. So what sort of jobs they can do? They can do anything that you like, really, as long as it's virtual. So it's anything that doesn't require face-to-face contact or them doing physical work for you, they can do. So they can do web design, web development. I've used them for developing my iPhone apps. So I've got 3 iPhone apps that they've worked on and they can do. I've used them for translation services for my apps. I've used lots of people in lots of different ways. Graphic design, detailed graphical design, all that sort of stuff. So lots of people can do lots of different things for you. How do I communicate with them? Email is the primary method of communication, but I've found certainly with Chris and Ray that we use email a bit, but instant message chat stuff is also good for that instant contact, and video conferencing, Skype, or I use one called VC. I'll talk about some of these tools later. They've all been really, really good. How do you pay them? If you've engaged them through some of the websites we'll talk about in a minute, then you'll often pay them through those sites, which are quite good. They're particularly if you use them on a project basis, you might pay them for those sites. Alternatively, I pay Ray and Chris through either PayPal or Western Union. Western Union's about instant fees, whereas PayPal transfers into bank accounts. So I've used both those for paying different people. So really, any electronic payment methods that you've both got access to are important. How much do they cost? This varies obviously depending on the location and the prevailing rates in that location. So don't forget you're actually employing people and paying them at rates in their local area. So you're paying them rates that are relevant for the other jobs that they could have in that area rather than equivalent weight. But typically Australian-based virtual assistants rates are somewhere between $30 to $75 an hour. Some of them could be higher than that. And your overseas virtual assistants can be, down at $2 or $3 an hour and up to $30 an hour, depending on the task they want, the jurisdiction they're in, where they're located, and those sorts of things. So it all varies, and it all depends on what they're doing. And that's something that you can negotiate. The question I get asked all the time is, aren't they taking jobs that could stay in Australia? I guess in some cases that's yes. But also know we're living in a global economy at the moment, and not only are people manufacturing products offshore and doing a hype of things, but we're now seeing services and things delivered by people overseas that were previously delivered here in Australia. In my case, no, they haven't taken jobs from anybody. I just simply, my business is structured the way that I wouldn't pay somebody to do Australian wages to do some of the work that, or the vast majority of the work that I get Ray and Chris to do. So, I guess really there was no job to take. So I'd either wouldn't pay somebody and I would keep doing it myself rather than pay, $40, $50 an hour for some of the jobs, because the value's not there for me to pay somebody $200 to write a blog article or something for me. I also see it's a goodwill initiative to work with people in other countries, and assisting people, living in countries less fortunate than us, and I know certainly, that that working from home saves Ray a lot of commuting time, so he doesn't have to transport himself to other areas, which gives her time for a family, spending time with her children, and gives her an opportunity to earn wages that are more than comparable with what she can earn back home in her country. So in a way where it's a win-win for everybody. I guess if you feel strongly about that you don't want to take jobs out of Australia, that's fine. You don't have to employ an overseas virtual assistant. And there are plenty of Australian people who are operating as virtual assistants at the moment. And in the resources page, when we talk about stuff, we've got some links to Australian websites where you can actually track down a virtual assistant, Australian-based virtual assistant, to help you. All right. I'm going to talk a little bit more about pros and cons of working with a virtual assistant, and then about how do we actually find one. First up, pros. I guess one of the big pros of a virtual assistant is that there are no real additional costs to employment apart from the cost of the VA themselves. So you don't have to, buy extra computer equipment or office space or do other things. And as I'm a home-based worker, that helps me. All right, I'm cutting in and out. I'm sorry. Is it? Yeah, obviously my voice keeps fading. Sorry about that. I'll try and please let me know if it's not working. The pros and cons, like I said, no additional costs. So often you can engage somebody at no additional expense to yourself, so you don't have to have offices and all that sort of stuff. That's good. Thanks, Jared. Thanks for the feedback. The flexibility, they're very flexible in terms of what you can do. I found the time zone thing for me is really quite good. The Philippines are sort of where Ray and Chris are, sort of 2 hours behind Australian time, which is really quite good. So it means I can often finish up stuff at the end of the day, forward them on to Chris and Ray to have some tasks to wrap up at the end of the day, and they can often get them done for me and back to me on the same day, which is always good. That whole thing I said about helping other people who are less fortunate for you, I think is a nice part of the process. Australia, we're very lucky with what we have, and other countries don't have the same luxury, so that's a good thing. The cons, one of the big problems is, no physical tasks. So, the challenge for me sometimes is, I would just love to be able to have somebody to go and do some photocopying or pick up some reports or do some other things. So there's no physical tasks. That's probably the biggest thing. So everything is electronic or online. The other thing, is if you're going to have somebody who in another country, they have different holidays, they have different climatic events, there's different events in different times of the year and all that sort of stuff. And you've just got to have up a calendar so that you know when they're available and when they're going to be doing things and everything else. We seem to have worked out a system that works for us. The other challenge is that it's internet access dependent, and at times the internet services in some of these other countries, particularly some of the third world countries, is not particularly good. Although, sometimes I compare it to the steam-powered internet that I have here in Bundaberg, and I think Chris and Ray often have better access than I do. But that's a problem. So no internet access, no access to your virtual assistant, which can be a challenge. This is the other thing is language, customs, and understanding. So some of the other virtual assistants that I've worked with in my time, English is not necessarily a first language for them. Sometimes it's a second or third language, and therefore you've got to be very direct and very focused with your communication. And slightly different customs and understanding. So using colloquial terms and that sort of stuff is often not I guess it's something you've got to get your head around. And time zones can also be a problem because they're not always there when you want them to be. So now I find that's not a problem for me, but I know that when I've worked with people in other time zones, then sometimes that's a real challenge because they're sort of 8 or 9 hours behind or whatever, and getting access to them quickly can be a problem. But that's all stuff that's relatively easy to sort out. How do I go about finding my virtual assistants? I guess the simple process, this was a process developed by a colleague of mine, Andrew Leinig. Really quite a simple process. First thing you got to do is develop a role profile or job description, and that's something that you probably should do anyhow. So get a clear understanding of what it is that you're looking for from your virtual assistant. You can then advertise on sites like onlinejobs.ph or similar sites, and some of the other sites that were listed in the resources are things like Virtual Staff Finder, Freelancer or Elance or Odesk. They're all good. Freelancer and Elance and some of those sites are certainly more geared to shorter project based consultancies and getting people on board for that, rather than long-term relationships, but you can do both through them. If you're looking particularly for a Filipino virtual assistant, onlinejobs.ph is excellent. and that's good. Australian-based sites, virtuallyyours.com.au, the Virtual Assistant Australia.net.au, and virtualassistant.net.au are all sites, and they're all in the materials that we'll send through to you. But there's lots of opportunities. You type virtual assistant into Google and you get a whole heap of stuff. So develop a role profile, use that role profile to advertise on an appropriate website or to go and find somebody. You need to have some simple criteria. So do this in advance. Have some simple criteria set up for how you might evaluate your candidates. So 5 to 7 criteria is what I would recommend. Use a simple decision matrix, and all you're going to do is rate them out of 10 in each of those criteria or something else. So decision matrix, if you type decision matrix into Google, will give you some good answers. I've also got there's an app I've developed on decision matrix that you can use for it, but really you can just have a table that you've got some criteria and your applicants across the top, either in a spreadsheet or somewhere else. So get some simple criteria, think through the criteria that you're going to use to determine who you'd want to have. I found that I got quite a lot of responses to my first ad. So I got I think I got about 100 responses for Ray's job, and I got some. I just got some simple criteria. I got people to some simple processes and got people to demonstrate their abilities. So I just asked them to do some simple tasks. So everybody who responded, I had a templated email that I sent back to them. It just said, "Thank you very much for your application. I need to get a little bit of information from you." And I asked them to fill out a simple survey which put their information into a format that I wanted it, so name, rank, serial number stuff. And then I asked them to do 3 simple tasks. In this case, I was looking for somebody with strong ability to write and research blog articles for me. So I gave them a newspaper article and said, I want you to write me a short blog article on that, 100, 200 word blog article based on that article. Type up some of my writing from my handwriting. So I scanned some handwriting and sent it to them, and send me an example of any other work that you might have done. Those simple criteria culled out about 90% of the applicants, which was quite good. And I got back to 10 finalists, and of those 10 finalists, I then put them through my criteria, and of those I selected the top 3, and I was going to conduct a Skype interview with the final 3. But once I spoke to Ray, I found her to be really quite excellent. So I just said, hey, I can't be bothered talking to anybody else. Why don't I go with you? So that was good. And then prepare once you've selected your person, you need to prepare a simple employment agreement. For me, that was just a simple email explaining the terms and conditions we'd agreed to. But you may want to have a more formal agreement as part of your organisation. So that's my simple process. Get a job profile, be clear what you're asking for, use that profile to advertise, use the profile as well to work out the criteria that you're going to select people on, get them to demonstrate their abilities with some simple tests. So that was really important. I did the same thing when recruiting Chris for a web thing. I got people to do some simple things that would demonstrate they had the capability to do what I wanted them to do, and I got some fantastic people out of it. Interview the final 3, and then just document it all into some sort of employment agreement. A fairly simple process. The key one there is to get people to demonstrate their ability for you. Okay. So that's a simple process for that. In terms of, improving your effectiveness, these are some of the tools. We talked about these in the productivity improvement webinar we ran just a couple of weeks ago. But you've got to have some collaboration tools. So remember, these people, will be remote from you, whether they're in Australia or elsewhere. So you need to have some tools where you can collaborate with them. So email is obviously important, and it's an important way to do things. The challenge I found with email is if you're not careful, you can end up with lots and lots of emails going backwards and forwards. And if you're like me and you already have a lot of emails every day, that just adds to the traffic and makes things a little bit more difficult. Down at the bottom, that area of the collaboration tools graphic there's a product called Bitrix 24. Bitrix 24 is a social collaboration tool, so it's a social intranet, and it's an online web-based service. I think for up to 12 people it's free, which allows you to set up projects, to communicate backwards and forwards by instant message, by like a social media type feed, and it's really quite good. So it's worth sorting out if you've got a little bit of a distributed workforce. So it's really quite good. Zoho has some great products as well. They have amazing range of products actually, but they have a chat product and also a meetings product that you might be able to use as well and get some advantage out of it. We also use video conferencing, so Skype's the typical one, and that's useful. You can actually instant message on Skype as well and use it to transfer files around, so it's quite a useful one. I also use a product called VC, that's spelled VSEE, and it's a video conferencing tool as well. Uses a bit lower bandwidth and has better screen sharing capability than Skype, but a good product as well. So you need some collaboration tools. So you need to work out how you're going to collaborate with these people and work with your team, because you need to work closely with them. In terms of task management is probably the next really important thing. So you've got to be able to talk about things, but you've also got to be able to manage tasks and processes. So a couple of tools here. We've talked about these before. Kanban, Flow, or Trello. I actually use Trello. These are in the resources page as well, so that's page 4 of the book, the workbook. But both good task management tools. I think Trello is slightly better in that it allows you to have instant messages around tasks and other stuff. So it's quite a useful tool. If you want to step it up a bit and have a bit more around project management, so a bit more of a project management structure, you can use Basecamp HQ. Basecamp's really quite a good project management tool, and Zoho Projects is also quite a powerful tool for managing projects. So it'll do Gantt charts and all those sorts of things, and also allow you to have real-time conversations around project tasks and those sorts of things. I find for most activities it's probably a bit of overkill. There are also other options like GQs down the bottom, so it's in the things as well. In the resources as well. So that's think of ways to manage your task. You may be able to use Outlook. So I guess the basic principles I look for are: do we have online access? So that's either web or VPNs or cloud. So how can you give shared access to all the things you want? And you may have a server that allows you to have remote logins from people, and you may be able to use the tools that are already available on that through Microsoft SharePoint or something else. In terms of business tools, I guess Google Docs is something that is really useful, because it's an online suite of Office products like Word and Excel and PowerPoint. So it allows you to actually collaborate live online with things. So we use a combination of normal standard Office products with Google Docs for things where we want to keep live, and we don't have to worry about version control and all that sort of stuff on them. So that works really, really well. Evernote is a great tool. You can share notebooks on Evernote, and it's a great tool to use in this situation as well. For those of you in business with a CRM, you want a CRM that either enables you to share it with your virtual assistants, and so some allow you to actually set up a system on their desktop and they can use it. I've gone to a web-based CRM. The one I'm using is Zoho CRM, but there are some other good ones, Capsule and some others are really quite good as well as Salesforce and others. You pay for those on a per user basis. The other great tool is my LiveScribe pen, and we talked about this last time. It's an electronic pen that actually records all your handwritten notes and those sorts of things, and I use those to take notes and flick them onto Ray and Chris for tools we need to do. So that's really important. The other thing you might want to think about is file storage and access. So, how are you going to share files and those sorts of things that you need to do? We use Dropbox a bit for that, but you could easily use Google Drive And there's another service I believe called Mozy, which I don't use, but apparently is quite good. So Mozy is M-O-Z-I. So you can use different services for different things. But at the end of the day, you want to be able to collaborate effectively, share information, share files, all those sort of things, in order to, I guess, help your team move on. So, if you're having challenges with any of these, with communication when they're far away, and understanding what people are up to, then the process will become very frustrating for you. So at a minimum, you need to use email and probably Skype, and instant messaging on Skype. You need some sort of task management tool. So whether you can do that through Outlook and SharePoint, or you need a tool like Trello or Kanban Flow, they're free, so you can actually use those, or very cost effective. And then you probably need to understand any business tools you might want them to share. But you may get away with just having office files transferred around and those sorts of things, and not have to worry about file storage and using Google Docs or other things. But at a minimum, you need some collaboration tools, and you need some task management tools to stay on top of things. All right, so in terms of leverage, there's lots of different ways you can get leverage from a virtual assistant. And I'm going to get you now to think, if you've got your workbook there, I'd like you to think about, what are the 3 steps you're going to take away from today on how you can use a virtual assistant in your business. Tim Ferriss in his book talked about people who actually had a job, actually employing a virtual assistant of their own, and using the time they freed up to actually work on other business interests and other things. So he talked about it using it in a job. I'm talking about using it in your business. So how can you use a virtual assistant in your business to give you some leverage? And the important thing to think about is, what are you going to do with the time you free up? So if you free up time by having somebody else do it, how can you get a maximum economic return on that time by focusing on something productive that only you can do in your business? So in a way, I think about it as saying, how do you outsource the $10 or the $20 jobs to somebody in order for you to focus on the $100 or the $200 or the $500 jobs in your business? So that's the important element to think of. So take 2 seconds to think about it. What are 3 steps you're going to take away from the day to explore how you might use a virtual assistant in your business? Make a bit of sense? So then in summary, I guess important thing is to think about how will you leverage your time using a virtual assistant, and what are you going to do with that extra time? So how can you make the best use of your time by engaging somebody else to do some jobs for you in your business? And it doesn't matter where those people are located. What would you have them do? So what are the things that you would get your virtual assistant to do for you? What are some of the tasks that you can use? And then can you pull enough of them together to have either a full-time position, a part-time position, or possibly just somebody on an ad hoc basis that does work for you? Develop a job description, or at least a task outline of the things that you'd like them to do. Once you're there, then you might want to work out, how to go and find them. There's lots of good websites. The resources are there to do it. And you can set up, you then need just make sure you put the right systems in place so that you collaborate and communicate well with them, and so that you manage the tasks. Now we're going to send you a recorded version of this. So we've been recording it, and we'll send you a resources list in the next day or so. So thanks very much for that. Got some time for some questions. Before we do, the next webinar is going to be on building a business model for your webinar. It's going to be on November the 27th, Wednesday night again. Same sort of time frame as this one. Thinking about what's a business model and how do I use it. Where can I get some leverage to take on the competition, and how can I make it a reality in our business? So thinking about your business model is really about how do we structure our business, and how do we make money in our business, and how do we differentiate ourselves in the marketplace. So that's going to be our next webinar. So I look forward to seeing you then. also, you've all heard about the horrible typhoon that's been through the Philippines. I would today's a free event, but I'd really encourage you, if you found it of value, to go to the Red Cross and donate some money. There's over 10 million people have been impacted directly by the typhoon. Many thousands of people have been killed, and certainly more than 500,000 people in immediate need of food and water. So anything you can do there would be wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you for participating in today's webinar. Look forward to seeing you at one of our future events, and hopefully you've got some value out of it. Have a great week. Bye.